Yes, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Wildcard Devy Show. We've got a guest. We've never done this before. We've got a guest. Guys, I am absolutely delighted to welcome in the absolute legend that is Mags from the Dynasty Hot Seat. Mags, we'll hand it straight over to you, bud. How are you doing?
I am absolutely fired up. Great to be the first guest on the show. That is fantastic. One of my favorite shows to listen to. So it's going to be like I've been here the whole time, lad. I'm going to fit right in. Of course, we are the best three from the Fantasy Wildcard team, after all.
It's true. Yeah, good. So, like Jack, obviously, you might also notice, like, because you've obviously checked out this week's episode of the Dynasty Hot Seat. We're in the same gear. We're recording back to back, so we're an hour in, but you guys are 1 minute 30 in. Jack, how you getting on, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good. Last Devy show episode, we were previewing very briefly the Europa League final, and Tottenham Hotspur managed to win one of those big golden trophies for the first time in a very long time. So I am riding that high along with my brother and my dad. So nothing can really get me down at the moment. So it's just
apart from being another year older, right?
Apart from being another year older, that is true. I have also turned 33 on the same day. So what a birthday present!
So that's a national championship, a Europa League final. What completes the hat trick? What are you going for next, mate?
Well, Leicester Tigers could still win the Rugby Premiership, so that would be a slam dunk of a year.
There you go. I'm going to go put some money on that. Well, listen, we've got a guest. I've already introduced him. Mags, tell us a little bit about your college football experience, first of all, because for a lot of tonight, you're going to do the interviewing, which is kind of, bring a guest on and make them do all the hard work, I guess. But tell us about your college kind of football exposure, because you put together an amazing thread week to week on X during the college football season. Tell us about kind of how you've found the experience, how you've got into it, how much Devy you play, what you know, and just give us that insight into where you're at.
Oh, I mean, it's been an absolute joy to watch more and more college football. I mean, well, first of all, getting the guests to do all the hard work. Have you ever seen the Dynasty Hot Seat before, boys? That's my entire thing. So it's nice to have the shoe on the other foot for a change. I've been doing that for the last 2 years. Been watching as much college football as I can, and then just nothing fancy, nothing too in-depth, just like, who was pretty sweet this week? And I'll put him in the thread and chat about him a little bit. And then it was only last year I managed to find myself in a Devy league, because kind of hard to come by a little bit unless you know people in the know. And thankfully, I know you boys who were able to sneak me into a Devy league. So it's been a bit of a learning curve, a bit of a process to it, which is kind of why I'm here, boys, to ask you a couple of burning questions I've got as a new Devy player, and I don't think I could be in better hands. So I'm excited to get going with it.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess where do you want to dive in? Let's go.
Yeah, let's start off. I've got a couple of questions for you. I'll go with the first one that was burning in my eyes. That is currently at the minute. I'm even going as far as thinking I'm swapping 26 first straight up for 2027 first, because in my head this is one of the best classes we have seen in forever. So, boys, my question to you is really, really simple. Is it as hyped up as I think it is and others think it is?
Jack, you want to say this one first, mate?
Yeah, sure. At the top end, absolutely it is. I don't think we've projected this far into the future as early for an entire draft class with such excitement. And look, college football has changed over the last few years, and suddenly you are going to play a bit more as a freshman because there is much more money, which has spread some of the top quality players around. But it's meant that we've seen the traits of some of these players earlier than we maybe have done in the past. So all that excitement for previous classes was probably based on their sophomore tape leading into their junior year. This class is headlined by two wide receivers who are the number 1 and number 2 picks in a Devy draft startup, even though they're not going to make it to the NFL for at least another 2 years. And those are obviously Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, the wide receivers from Ohio State and Alabama. Those top two players are worth trading certainly your 2026 first round pick away to get another 2027 first round pick for the opportunity to trade multiple 2027 picks to get the 101 or the 102, in my opinion. And I'm certainly, as our listeners will know, as our watchers will know, I'm going to lean wide receiver. So the fact that these two are by far cutting above everybody else is making me very excited and very grateful to have a share of each of them in two different leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a startup mock draft back in March, and I'm just looking back at the board now, and of all the players available in college football, 7 of our starting 12, our first round picks, were from that 2027 class, projected to be from that 2027 class. 5 wide receivers, which again just goes to show how stacked that class is at the top. Outside of the 2 names that Jack's already mentioned, you've got TJ Moore, Cam Coleman at Auburn, Bryant Wesco, again at Clemson with TJ Moore, who are all kind of like, I'd call them the big 5. They're the names that you're going to routinely see in those drafts. And then you can also make a case for others, like Ryan Wingo at Texas is going to pick up on a lot of vacated targets this year. When you go down slightly, maybe you're tearing down slightly, but this guy would be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in most classes. A guy like Nick Marsh, who broke out at Michigan State. Like, there is a lot of talent in there. And then the quarterbacks, like, there's a couple of obviously big name guys, kind of headlined by DJ Lagway, I think, at the moment, because there is one guy who I'm sure we'll mention at some point. We don't really know what he's going to do. Yeah, it's the perfect time if you come in, if you're playing Dynasty in the end of a Dynasty cycle, to start thinking about rebuilding. I don't think it's the best kept secret anymore because people have been so loud about it online. But wherever, if there are players now, if you see your window closing, and realistically you might scrape into the playoffs, but you're not looking like you're going to win, get ahead of the curve and start selling them, because those contenders will still want production to go all in. So there's ways and means to get it done. There's ways and means to get it done, and I don't think you'll regret it at all.
Yeah, and I think if we move on to the running backs in this class, there's a little bit more murkiness or blurriness, but that means that there's some real value to be had in the 2027 class. I think you've got Nate Frazier, you've got James Peoples, who hasn't really had a starting role, and there's one more guy, Caden Durham at LSU. There are 3 names that people will be excited for. That Caden Durham, super excited. I don't really understand what LSU were doing. They just couldn't run the ball, even though Caden Durham was playing out of his skin last season. So I think those are the 3 names you're really going to hear in the 2025-2026 season. So there's still some value there. I mean, running back is a little bit murkier after those 3 because we've just not seen enough from them. But that's not uncommon in today's college football. That's kind of the flip side of seeing wide receivers earlier, because there is money to be spread around in college football. There's also money to keep aging running backs in college and not declaring for the NFL. So
I'll give you one more thing on that. Like the one thing I'm not going to do, like, yes, this class is very, very good. But I'm not all in on shifting my 2026 firsts for 2027 firsts, which seems to be something that's getting bandied around a lot at the moment. And the pure reason I'm not going to do that is 2026 looks very deep at the quarterback position. And if you need a quarterback, that would be the year to hold on to those firsts. And even with a late first, you're probably going to get a guy who stands a good chance of making a significant impact in Dynasty. So, don't rush unless you know that you're sat in a dynasty roster that's pretty loaded at quarterback anyway. That's the only time I'd be looking at trading back and moving back a year and seeing if you can pick up anything extra. But yeah, the quarterback class probably for depth and value is deeper in 2026 than 2027, but that can shift a lot, obviously with NIL and the transfer portal.
And that's something you can certainly wait on. You can wait to sell those 2026 firsts until it's kind of confirmed that that's a deep quarterback class, because your dynasty players aren't all going to be aware that it's going to be a deep 2026 quarterback class.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the second question, because I'm sure people listening at home have gone, why have they not mentioned? You probably noticed Phil skirting around his name earlier. Arch Manning is obviously amazingly talented. He's a Manning. We all know this. The biggest enigma right now doesn't appear to be, is he good or is he not? It's, when's he going to come out? And for me, this is a little bit trickier than ever before. We've seen Trevion Henderson last year went back to college when no one was expecting it. We've seen this year with Nick Singleton as well going back when no one really expected it, and even guys like Evan Stewart as well. Is it harder and harder to figure out when these players are going to declare, or do you boys have more of an insight being in the Devy world?
Oh, that depends whether we're asking about Arch Manning or in general. So I'll answer the Arch Manning part, and I'll let Phil have a go at the general deciphering when people are going to declare, and as opposed to when they're first eligible. And we'll do a quick outline of what that means. So Arch Manning in particular is someone who the hype is there because he is a Manning. He was a highly recruited high school quarterback who went to Texas, who has gone to a program where he knew he was probably going to sit for a year and learn and develop behind Quinn Ewers, and now has kind of the college football world at his feet. Texas are amongst the top three favorites for a national championship. They have significant weapons in the wide receiver room for Arch Manning, and Arch is someone who, like you say, we're not really worried about whether he is any good or not. We've seen quite a lot of high school tape. He's had a couple of starts in college, and we've seen that translate well. Obviously, there's a whole different ballgame from being a spot starter to being a full-time starter and all the expectations that are on his shoulders. But everything we've seen in high school, all we've seen from his lack of social media presence, is he's got a very level head on those shoulders. And above that, he's got a very wise support team around him. Obviously, he has uncles that have played in the NFL. He has a granddad who has played in the NFL. So he's got the right people around him. And they have said from the beginning that they would actually like Arch Manning to have 30 college starts under his belt before he goes to the NFL. Now, that would mean that Arch Manning would have to play, in the new college football world, he'll have to play 2 full seasons and make it to the national championship just to get that 30 number under his belt. But there is a clear indication here that Arch Manning is going to play his senior season. So he may well not be part of that 2027 class and might emerge in 2028. In fact, at this stage, I'd be really surprised if he does come out in 2027. Two things have got to go. Two things have got to work for him to come out in 2027. The right team has to be picking near the top of the draft or willing to pay up to move up to number 1 and draft him. And he's got to play really well for Texas and potentially win a national championship. I think he is only going to move on from college when he is ready and feels like he's accomplished everything he wants to at Texas. And his family have a proven record of hand selecting which teams they don't want to play for.
Yeah, absolutely. The wider scopes of that conversation is very much driven by NIL. It's driven by NIL and conversations between agents and scouts within the league. I'll give you a couple of examples, particularly at the quarterback position. Over the last couple of years, obviously our most recent 101, Cam Ward in the NFL draft, toyed with the idea of declaring the year previous when he was playing at Washington State. He toyed with the idea of coming into the draft. His agent asked the scouts, like, what type of kind of draft capital we're looking at, and they said probably round 4, round 5, day 3 pick. So NIL and the transfer portal made Cam Ward's choice for him. He decided, well, hang on a minute, I can take a transfer as a senior graduate, move across to Miami, play in a bigger market, in a bigger conference, put some great tape out there, and look at that, a year later, he's gone 101. For the Devy point of view, like there's kind of layers to that, because historically, what we always used to do was we used to chase 5 stars. We used to chase your Tate Martells, your Spencer Rattlers, your DJ Ungaleles, who are some of the kind of most famous bands that have left us all very nervous about drafting quarterbacks. Yet, to your average Devy player, they remain like undeterred. Like they'll just carry on swinging the bat at 5 stars. And if you look at the most recent example, who it looks like it's not maybe going to work out for, it's looking like Nico Iamaleava. After his kind of high-profile off-season. But players keep swinging the bat. But more savvy players now can follow the breadcrumbs and the trail that players like Cam Ward are laying there for us, and start to follow, actually, if we don't get that early declaration, or if they declare and then decide they're going to go back because they're not hearing the right thing, target those guys that have got more tape, have put more things together. Senior transfers, again, Jim Daniels is another fantastic example of a guy who wasn't looking like much. He wasn't on Devy radars at all. And anyone who tells you he was are lying to you. He went from Arizona State to LSU, and all the signs were there. He just bided his time. He pushed that declaration back a year. And for me, good Devy managers now should be looking for late breakouts and transfers, and having to spend more moderate capital in their Devy drafts, if they choose to, on those quarterbacks, than having to overpay for one of the elite 5-star incoming freshmen, in the kind of first round of a supplemental draft set.
Yeah. And, the basic rule that we're now having to underline further is that you can't rely on somebody coming and saving your dynasty team because they're eligible for the draft. Like Emeka Egbuka, for example, was someone who, if you were relying on a wide receiver coming out, he probably would have got late first round capital, if not early round 2 draft capital in last year's draft. He came back to school. There are loads of other reasons to stay in college now, NIL being one of them, the opportunity to have another go at chasing a national championship. You can't rely on a particular draft class. So you could obviously draft an incoming freshman class. You can still target a draft in that way and try and hoover up all the 2025 wide receivers. You'd be doing yourself no favors. I'm afraid. There's only, if you check out our wide receiver preview, there's only one guy that we're really interested in. But you can still do that, but especially in a class as less ceiling dependent. Those guys could come out across 3, maybe even 4 different draft classes because of redshirt years or super senior transfers, that kind of thing. So deciphering declarations has got harder. It wasn't easy anyway, if I'm perfectly honest with you, trying to work out, especially for these like highly productive college players. So Mags and I have really spoken about RJ Harvey as an example, someone who kind of was out of eligibility, so he had to go into the NFL draft, and that's worked out brilliantly. But he's super productive. Yeah. So if you're super productive at a smaller school and you're going to get some NIL money, you're going to stay. Ashton Ginty's the same, someone who stayed in college and was super productive, obviously has gone super high in the NFL draft. So I think relying on when someone's going to declare is a dangerous game regardless. So don't draft someone based on their how soon they might join your team, unless you are really going with someone who is in their final year of eligibility. And like Phil says, for a quarterback position, if you've got someone who's making a senior transfer, they are going to be on your team sooner.
Yeah, that's super helpful, lads, and it's just another wrinkle which I think does make Devy a slightly more difficult game. And one thing in particular is my third question, which seems to be like the highs for players in Devy seem to be real high, and then all of a sudden, oh hey, there's a brick wall and you're going nowhere. I mean, just some recent names. Look at guys like Rocket Sanders were at the top of people's Devy list not that long ago. Look, even last year, Zachariah Branch was, an absolute superstar, and now people are a bit like, what's going on? Even like smaller prospects. Whenever I first started scouting properly college players, I was like, oh, look at this Tyler Brown guy at Clemson. He's amazing. I haven't seen him since. I don't know what's happened. Like, it just seems that players sort of vanish and disappear. Is that because of how fast everyone's developing all around them, or systems? Or I can't quite work that out yet as to how quickly players go from up high to just falling off a cliff.
There's more. It starts with the overburden of recruiting, and there are recruiting services like 24/7 Sports or On3, ESPN do their 300 list, and that sought after kind of value of chasing 5 stars and things like that. Like, sometimes they're not worth the paper they're written on. Like, and the best thing you can do is really kind of grind the tape, and that's hard, particularly with incoming freshmen, like, because a lot of the time they look like men against boys. And then they get to college, and all of a sudden they're the young pups. Everyone else is older, bigger, faster. It's a bit like rookies coming to the NFL, just at that kind of next level down. But they can still get out of this by. What you've got to remember is they are young men. They're 18 to 21 years old in the vast majority of cases. Obviously, extended eligibility and all that type of stuff kind of means they could get to 22, 23. Now, you could be an absolute stud of an 18-year-old wide receiver and come across a 22-year-old cornerback who might not end up being a first-round NFL player, might not end up being a day 2 NFL player, but they've got 4 years of smarts and how to kind of play you. And the development curve for every kid will be slightly different. And we are very reactionary, I think, to cast players aside, to want to sell, etc. But some of these guys come good. Like, it's just a different development curve for all of them. That's why every year in the NFL draft, there's that guy that breaks out of nowhere. That's why there is a Jaden Daniels that makes it through and sneaks past you, despite all the scouting and all the work you do. So really, it's about trying to cover bases and make sure you hit more than you miss, really.
Yeah, I think the high highs and low lows, like you say, Phil, we are in sports. We are reactionary. If we see someone do something amazing, we're going to hype them up, and then suddenly there's more eyes on that person, and their value in Devy goes up and through the ceiling. And obviously, there's lots of factors that we need to consider when we're actually evaluating what that player can be like in college, and then more importantly in the NFL, because it's all great having a wide receiver that can bully cornerbacks in college if he's 4 years older and is just 2 foot taller. That is genuinely the circumstances in some college games. There's a guy who is just going to be taller, and the quarterbacks he plays against aren't that good. That hype will Quentin Johnson much. So there are players who are going to be hyped up, and that their high ceiling that they're being drafted at is actually a false one, because that doesn't translate to the NFL, where everybody is big and strong. You have to be able to create separation, and if that's not your skill set, you're not going to survive in the NFL. So yeah, I think caution against following the media sensation, and that's where Devy kind of actually goes away from mainstream college football media, in that we're actually looking for those traits that make someone good at the position, not who's had the most spectacular bursting run through the line of scrimmage, or who's being able to stiff arm someone as a running back is important, but it's not the only thing. If you can put one stiff arm on a guy and then you burn down the field once, that's going to make it onto X. That's going to be clipped up and shown again and again. But it's not the most translatable trait. You need to be able to see someone who can read the game, who has patience behind the line of scrimmage, who can keep their contact balance when they're tackled. And if you don't have that, and you've just followed the hype of some X clips, that's where you end up taking someone whose low is super low, because their actual translatable traits don't make sense in any NFL offense.
Yeah, it just makes it even trickier than if I can move on to my next question, which is, playing Devy, you got to weigh up those high highs and low lows against, you know, more sure things. Guys in the NFL already we know are elite players and great players, and then how do you balance that with potential versus the here and the now? So I mean, just if we take the top floor example of someone like Jeremiah Smith, who we know is about as sure thing as it gets in college football, but he's not in the NFL. He's not going to be in the NFL next year. It's going to be a little while. How do you place him amongst other wide receivers that we have in the NFL right now? I mean, my temptation is to be like, oh, I'd stick him in a tier with Malik Neighbors up at the very, very top anyway, because he's young and he's going to be great. But do you caution away from that kind of, like, I don't know, optimism, let's call it, for players like this?
It depends how badly you want to win. And ultimately, the thing about Devy is you still, the only championship you're playing for is on the NFL side of the ball. And this is where I think we very much kind of piss into the wind against a lot of the kind of Devy community, because they're one of the allures of Devy is been an armchair scout, and we've talked about that a lot. It's one of our favorite things to do. Watch the film, look at the prospects, root for the guys on your rosters on a weekend because you've picked them, because you believe in their talent. But ultimately, I don't start any of those guys on a game week. I start my NFL team, and it's your NFL team that is going to win you your championship. You're right. Jeremiah Smith does nothing for you on a Sunday apart from make you feel good in 2 years' time. In terms of like where you rank them, and that's why NFL players always hold more value. Now, just to give you your answer on how high you think Jeremiah Smith is, it's going off on a tangent slightly. I sit him just behind Puka Nacua. So wherever you've got Puka in your kind of dynasty rankings, maybe 5, 6, he's around there. He's that good, and he's that good now, 2 years away. But this is where you're in that constant conundrum of where are you in your cycle, because selling Jeremiah Smith seems borderline absurd. But if you are in a window where you are one piece away from a championship, and that league is, I don't know, a $50 league, say, and you stand to make a good amount of wedge from it, then you've got that decision to make. Do you sell him and acquire yourself a Puka Nacua? It breaks your heart, because the allure of scouting those players and finding that guy and having him on your roster is really, really tempting. But that refusal to sell, to seal the deal and win a championship, can hinder players. massively. And we see it in every league. Like, there are guys that we play with regularly, like degenerates like ourselves, that are in just about everything. You join a new Devy league and you see the same names pop up, 3 or 4 of the same names. And you always know that there's someone in there that won't sell the player they draft. Like, I picked him up in the 3rd round 3 years ago. No, he's going to make it to my NFL roster. I'm going to keep him forever. And you go, all right, okay. Like, fair enough. I'll go looking elsewhere. It's just that extension of playing Dynasty and knowing your window, knowing your cycle. I think Jeremiah Smith is the best buy you can make, but also depending on your window, you can make an argument is the very best sell because of what it's going to do for you and the piece it's going to land you. And that's almost ludicrous to think about because in that blissful utopia, you want Jeremiah Smith on your roster. But I'll take a championship every time.
Yeah, I think the Jeremiah Smith conversation is basically irrelevant because whoever owns him is not trading him. And actually, I'd advocate for that. I think Jeremiah Smith, especially on a team where if your NFL roster doesn't have one of those top 5 wide receivers, then Jeremiah Smith is the next guy that we can, as close as possible, guarantee is going to be one of them. But you have to think back, look at where Marvin Harrison Jr. is ranked in current Dynasty rankings. Marvin Harrison Jr. was this good a prospect too. Mm-hmm. He was hyped up as much as Jeremiah Smith, and you can't trade Marvin Harrison Jr. for Puka Nacua right now, because he's had still a good freshman season, rookie season, but not performed to the immediate fantasy ceiling that we wanted. So Jeremiah Smith is probably one that we won't have to talk about too much because, like you say, he's either been drafted 101 or he's not being. I don't know how he hasn't been drafted 101. Let's be honest. Even as a freshman, that was the rating, but. An example that fits this talent via immediacy prospect here is a trade that I made recently in a Devy league. So I had Carnell Tate and TJ Moore on my Devy roster, 2 of my absolute favorite wide receiver prospects. So Carnell Tate is probably going to be in next year's NFL draft and could be the first wide receiver off the board. He has the talent to do that. He's probably competing with Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. So there's a couple of names for you to get ahead of the game on. And TJ Moore is, he also has, if he wasn't in the same draft class as Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith, then we'd be talking about him as probably the wide receiver 1 in that class. He is that talented, and he's in a great system that is going to highlight his talents at Clemson and get him ready for the NFL really well. Dabo Swinney is going to have a real talent and he is good at molding wide receiver talent. T. Higgins is like a really good example of that. Someone who is his floor is a wide receiver 2 pretty much every week. So TJ Moore has a higher floor than T. Higgins, I believe. And so I traded away both of those guys, and it hurt me a lot to trade them both away, as well as a 2026 first round Devy pick and a 2027 second round Devy pick. So that's a lot of capital to give away. But I managed to get Caleb Williams and AJ Brown in that trade. And so that is the clear talent via immediacy trade going on right there. The guy I was trading with is looking to dominate the league in 3, 4, 5 years, and will do so if he is successful. He knows, he listens to this show. He has a third of all the Devy players in the league right now. And so he's happy with the trade. He's added that to an absolute arsenal of talent that's coming through in the next few years. But for my roster, I was absolutely desperate for a quarterback. Caleb Williams is a top 10 dynasty quarterback for me. And so that is more important. Like Phil said, they're going to score me points straight away. They give me a shot at fast tracking a rebuild of this team that was relying on Bryce Young at quarterback because Tom Brady retired a few years ago when it needed a bit of a revamp. So immediacy is more important, but Jeremiah Smith is probably the only exception to that in my mind.
Yeah, there comes that kind of idea of like we assume that just because we drafted Devy guy that he's got to play on our NFL roster. It doesn't at all. You can draft to trade, and you've got to make that judgment call of actually where is my roster? Who are the guys that are really going to help drive it forward when they get into the NFL? And who am I happy to cash out on? And, you can cash out on decent players. And then the other skill is realizing where that hype is full. We've kind of mentioned him jokingly, Quentin Johnston earlier. He stands the test of time as my biggest balls up in one of my leagues because I drafted him with very moderate capital. And I think I took him in the 4th round of a Devy draft. Then he went on and had a big year at TCU. TCU did really well. He gets first round NFL draft capital. And I ignored all the red flags because I was like, right, I've got a guy I took in the 4th who's just been drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. Yeah, I just ignored the fact he's a wide receiver that can't fucking catch. But you get stuck in this idea of like, well, hang on a minute. He's already made me this much value. Like, let's see what he can make me. When the smart decision would have been, no, Phil, get the chuff out of there and run. Because I would have been able to reinvest in a player that potentially could have landed on my team.
Yeah, you're using winning lottery tickets to buy more lottery tickets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And because if you're trading for an NFL player that you are already convinced and you've seen him score points on somebody else's team and you're trading for him, you still get to root for the guy that you drafted and you still get to be like pleased with yourself for scouting that guy when he does well, but know that you've got a good return for him already. So it's kind of that's how I make myself at peace with the fact that I've traded away TJ Moore and Carnell Tate. I can still root for them to be really good for that guy's team because I have some players that I know are good for my team too, and that's okay.
Yeah, and if you're sort of getting into it like me, and maybe you don't even have time to do what I'm doing, lads, and looking at as much tape as possible. One of the things I hear all the time about Devy and even like drafting rookie prospects is, oh, you should never helmet scout. That is an absolute travesty. Don't helmet scout. But at the same time, you throw a dart at a top 20 wide receiver right now in fantasy football, you're going to hit an Ohio State player, more than likely. That's going to happen. You throw the dart at the tight ends, it's going to be an Iowa guy. Like, these schools produce these talents time after time after time again. So is there even like a little part of you just like, you know what? I'm not quite sure what to do here. I was going to take the Ohio State wide receiver. I was going to take the Iowa tight end. I don't care. I'll just take the Alabama running back. Like, they're probably going to be really good.
Go on, Jack.
I think there's a temptation to do that. It's easier to scout the big school guys, and we can give schools reputations like Ohio State and LSU fighting over who's wide receiver university. Like you say, Iowa tight ends have a good reputation, but we've seen that kind of fall apart a little bit over the last few years. Iowa haven't actually produced a top tight end in the last 2 draft classes, and the guys that we were excited for have gone back to school. Like Luke Lackey, I believe, has gone back to Iowa, or maybe even entered the transfer portal. I can't remember. Some of these guys that we are really excited for because they were high recruits and they went to a school that produces that position, that's kind of let us down over the last couple of years. Like, think about Michigan running backs. Think about even Alabama running backs. They've not produced. Michigan have Donovan Edwards was hyped up beyond belief. And Blake Corum, as productive as he was in college in that system, he's a backup in the NFL, which sometimes is fine. You take a 3rd or 4th round pick.
Do you know why? It's because the college football game, there's a curse, just like the Madden curse. there's a curse on that as
Don't
well.
say
I'm gonna
that,
have to
because
keep an eye on
Jeremiah
that.
Smith and Ryan Williams are on this year's cover.
Are they? Oh,
Yeah.
no. Well,
They've
Donovan
really-
Edwards. Donovan Edwards was the cover star for the college. Like, what? How did that
Yeah,
happen?
but he never should have been. They've really gone hard to break that curse after year one,
Yeah.
haven't they?
Yeah.
No, look, as far as the helmet scouting goes, like there's layers to it. Like Ohio State wide receivers, let's use that as the example. Like beneath the layer of just scouting the helmet is the fact that Brian Hartline is an outstanding coach and wide receiver developer. Couple that with the school's budget and ability to target the elite guys, you know that you're going to get a level of polish and development because the track record says it. However, the cautionary tale is somebody like Brandon Inniss. Brandon Inniss was actually a higher ranked recruit than Carnell Tate coming in the same receiver class. And for whatever reason, we talked development curves earlier, he has found himself very much on the outside looking in. And so that's not to say your process isn't okay. You've found a guy whose high school tape was outstanding. Caught touchdown passes in the All-American high school game and looks really, really good. He's got to Ohio State and something hasn't clicked. Like, that's okay. What is interesting now is, again, going back to the NIL and the transfer portal, is the idea of helmet scouting quarterbacks. Because I think you need to be a little bit more cautionary with that. Because just because they're at Alabama, just because they're at insert big schools name here, like, rather than just scout the helmet, scout who's in front of them on the depth chart as well. Okay, so if you take the example of Alabama have a relatively open competition this year that's going to be headlined probably by Ty Simpson. But that's why the time to buy in would be on their incoming rookie this year in Keelan Russell. Incredibly talented, one of the highest ranked guys in the recruiting class. Looks like a genuine prospect. However, if you gambled on Alabama's incoming freshman last year, well, there wasn't one. They took a transfer and a guy called Austin Mack from Washington, and people might have gone, "Oh, he's come across with Coach DeBoer. Yeah, let's draft him." It's not a wise Devy choice. And again, like when Jalen Milroe and Bryce Young were entrenched as the starter, Alabama took a guy called Eli Holstein, who actually looks like a very decent prospect and is really, but it's taken him transferring out because of the timelines of the guys above him to give himself the opportunity to showcase himself. And so just scouting the helmet might not land you anything. You've got to look at what's ahead of them on the depth chart and their route to playing time as well.
Yeah, I'd like to say helmet scouting is a tool that can be used. I would say allow yourself to be drawn by the helmet to, like you say, a school that has a reputation of developing a certain position, and then have a look at that school and that room. So if that school has a reputation for developing running backs, is it because they have a specific running back coach who has been there for 5, 6, 7 years and has a track record of developing running backs with a particular size and skill set, and he's helping develop that style of player? Then you look at the room and say, is the guy that I am thinking about matching with that profile? Or is it that this running back coach and this school that produces really good third down backs that are great for PPR, but actually the guy in that room is 6'2" and 210 pounds, then he doesn't fit the profile. And so allow yourself to be drawn, your attention to be drawn by the helmet scouting. I don't think that's a bad thing, because if you look at the breakdown of who gets drafted and who's fantasy relevant, the big schools will have a larger percentage of players that have made it to the NFL and are successful for your fantasy team. but there's more nuance to it than just helmet scouting. So use it as a tool, but assess the coaching, assess the coaches, assess what makes those players really good in the NFL, and has this player got it? I mean, Phil mentioned Brandon Inniss at Ohio State. There's much less successful wide receivers that people took a punt on, like Kojo Antwi, or who that. If you're not an Ohio State fan and you didn't play Devy 4 years ago, you probably don't know who he is, because he went to Ohio State. He was a 4-star recruit, but he didn't fit the profile of being able to separate well or to get an explosive release off the line of scrimmage. And those are the key things that Brian Hartline works with first with wide receivers. So use it, but don't rely on it.
Yeah.
Love it. Boys, you've been invaluable with your answers here. Sort of five burning questions that I had for you. I didn't tell you this one. I do have one more. It's a sneaky one. Who's going to win the national championship, Alabama or Ohio State, lads? I got to know.
Jack?
Ohio State going back to back.
There's more. I'll say it. It pains me to say it. Right now, there is more chance of Ohio State going back to back than there is Alabama winning it. Yeah, that sucks to say and shouldn't be said, but it's a reality right now.
Not my Oregon Ducks. No.
Nah, you've got to get past Ohio State first.
Penn State.
I actually about 2 or 3 weeks back put out an early power rankings for college football. I had Penn State at number 1. I think Penn State right now are returning such a deep selection of well-established college football talents that they should be the guys to make a real run at it. But then again, they've got to get over themselves and they've got to get over their inability to do it in the moments that matter most before you can take it away from someone like Ohio State.
How sick are we going to be hearing the words Josh Allen next to Drew Aller, like by the end of next year? I'm going to be sick of hearing that, I think.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I'm glad we've answered your questions, Mags, and what a great first guest to have on. We have dragged you in to our final game. We haven't had a round of hold, sell, acquire for a little while because we've had other games to distribute our incoming freshman profiles. So we are going to play around, and we actually have 3 players to acquire. So this is a buying shopping spree show for you. We've got 3 names for you. I have got James Peoples, the running back at Ohio State, because he happened to land on my Devy pick. He was still available in the 3rd round this week. Oh, Phil's buying into James Peoples. Even if we are just talking stocks and shares, like we've mentioned before, James Peoples is kind of going under the radar a little bit as someone who didn't play loads last season. This is a 4-star recruit, 5'10", 203 pounds, a great size for a running back in college. Last year, just the 49 carries, 197 yards, 2 touchdowns. But he is sharing the backfield with CJ Donaldson, an incoming transfer, and freshman Bo Jackson, and that is about it at Ohio State. So this guy's value is going to increase after game week 2. We'll see what happens against Texas in week 1, but in game week 2 and game week 3, easier out of conference schedule for Ohio State. I think we're going to see James Peoples really go off as Ohio State look to run the ball quite a bit in those out of conference games, and his value is going to shoot up. So even if you don't think he is an NFL caliber running back, he's someone that I would be acquiring now to then sell on later. Mags, who have you got for us?
I've gone for one of the guys I loved watching the most last year. Young player, still a young prospect, Isaac Brown, running back out of Louisville. Just lightning in a bottle. I still think he managed to get over 1,000 yards last year, despite only really noticed him coming on a little bit towards the end. But man, just one of those guys who really jumped out and stood out on the page. I know Louisville were actually one of my favorite teams to watch last year. and it was mainly because of Isaac Brown and just the electricity he brought. He can catch it in the backfield. He's able to make these long bursting runs that, you know, all NFL teams are looking for. So I'm looking forward to seeing if he can take the next step next year and start pushing and challenging people like, you know, we mentioned Caden Durham earlier and things like that. I wonder if he could get up to that kind of hype level at the minute. I that's kind of where I see him. I kind of have him and Caden Durham. I'm really excited about both of those running backs.
That's a brilliant shout out, Max. And here's a plug for you, right? If anybody's watching this and hasn't seen this week's episode of the Dynasty Hot Seat with all three of our lovely faces, I took a guy in the very, very late rounds that Isaac Brown just reminds me of so much in Keaton Mitchell. That explosion getting to the outside. And yeah, listen, go check out that full draft. Go check out the Dynasty Hot Seat. And yeah, definitely look to acquire Isaac Brown.
Excellent. Two electric running backs coming out in a couple of years' time. Phil, you've gone in a different direction.
Absolutely. We've spoken a lot about the pattern and the development curve for quarterbacks and how that traditional 3 years and out doesn't really exist anymore. We should be looking at guys who are transferring and looking to do big things. Fernando Mendoza is a name that is firmly on the rise at the moment in terms of the 2026 NFL draft class. It is a deep class at quarterback, and this is a guy who is starting to make a lot of noise. He has played for a couple of years now at Cal. He's only started 11 games, and Cal struggled last year. To be quite frank, they sucked. And he is finding himself transferring to a much better situation at Indiana with coach Kurt Signetti, who really, in his first year at Indiana, really did a fantastic job of changing the trajectory and direction of that program. And he brings in Fernando Mendoza to be his guy. 6'5", 225 is a textbook pocket passer, which kind of breaks away from like where fantasy wins are at the moment. But he completed nearly 70% of his passes last year, which is an absurdly high number. We kind of look for guys to hit that 60% threshold. Anything between 60 and 65 is great. So to be up there at nearly 70% is unbelievable. He has still got some development, but right now he's being touted, if you kind of do the reading at the moment, as sneaking into a lot of people's first round mocks. He was touted by Sports Illustrated this week at 16th overall to the Steelers, who still have a very kind of murky future quarterback situation. Dan Brugler has also mentioned him as a first round projection. And it just seems like this is the right time because a load of people will be sleeping on him. Loads of people won't have even heard the name right now. I'm on the clock in 2 picks at the 410 of a 12-team league. We're in the last round, 2 picks from the end, and he is still untaken. I am going to snaffle him up, I hope. And listen, we talked earlier about the strategy of drafting to flip. When he starts to get that first-round projection, I actually have a roster that's got 3 decent quarterbacks in Pat Mahomes, Brock Purdy, Tua. I will flip him and re-roll, and it just seems like the perfect bit of business. But get in now before the price skyrockets, and then choose what you want to do with him.
Excellent. I'll just hold off on releasing this episode so that you can make
so
that
I can
pick,
get in
right?
first.
Yeah. Cool. There we go. 3 names, some of which you may have heard, some probably Fernando Mendoza, not quite so much. So you can't say we don't fit all audiences and all depths of Devy leagues. So, Mags, thank you so much for joining us. Our very first guest. You are 100% the best guest we have ever had on this show.
I love it.
Where can the wonderful people follow all of your amazing work?
Go check out the Dynasty Hot Seat. Just managed to hit over that magic 1,000 subscriber mark on YouTube, which is amazing. Thank you so much. Absolutely glad. So come along, play along with. I'm currently rebuilding the worst Dynasty team in the world. We're in year 2 of the rebuild. It's real bad still, but we're getting there slowly and surely. If you want to come along, if you think you can help out, if you think you know how to play Dynasty, or you know some of these Devy prospects that I should be looking at with my draft picks, come along and help out and leave a comment in some of those videos. It's a hell of a lot of fun. And of course, check out the amazing Fantasy Wildcard Dynasty show as well with me and Ali and James.
Absolutely. We all do that, so you should too. And if you are listening or watching this episode and you've got any burning questions you want to pitch to Phil or myself, then please get in touch, and we are very open to having more guests on the show. In the meantime, make sure you are following us on X at Wildcard Devy, and make sure you are following and subscribing and putting those little notification bells on the Fantasy Wildcard YouTube channel. And we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Peace.